The world was a different place, a vast and untamed expanse where the very air hummed with the presence of giants. This was the Pleistocene epoch, a great age of ice and immense change that stretched from about 2.6 million years ago to roughly 11,700 years before our present day. It was a time of dramatic climatic shifts, where colossal ice sheets, miles thick, would advance and retreat across the continents like the slow, powerful breath of the planet itself. These glaciers sculpted the land, carving deep valleys and leaving behind great moraines of rock and soil. In the spaces between these walls of ice, a unique ecosystem thrived, a cold, dry grassland known as the Mammoth Steppe. This was not the Arctic tundra of today, but a rich, productive environment that stretched from the coast of modern-day Spain, across all of Europe and Asia, over the great land bridge of Beringia, and into the heart of North America. It was a world of immense scale and profound challenge, a stage set for one of the most epic and enduring encounters in the history of our species, the relationship between early humans and the majestic, formidable mammoth. To understand this relationship, we must first step into this lost world and meet its most iconic inhabitant. The woolly mammoth, Mammoths primigenius, was a creature of breathtaking adaptation and power. It was not the largest of the mammoth species, but it was supremely equipped for life on the cold steppe. A full-grown bull could stand over 11 feet tall at the shoulder and weigh 6 tons or more, a mountain of muscle and fur moving with a ponderous, earth-shaking grace. Its most defining feature was its coat-long, shaggy outer layer of dark brown or black hair, sometimes reaching nearly a meter in length, covering a dense, woolly undercoat that provided critical insulation against the bitter winds. Beneath this protective layer was a thick skin and a substantial layer of fat, a biological furnace that stored energy and warmth through the long, dark winters. But the mammoth's adaptations were even more intricate. Its enormous, curved tusks, which could span 16 feet in large males, were not merely weapons. They were multi-purpose tools, used for digging through snow to reach the frozen grass beneath, for stripping bark from trees, for fighting rivals during the mating season, and perhaps even for clearing snow and ice from pathways for the herd. These great incisors of ivory were central to its survival. Its ears were small, a crucial design to minimize heat loss and prevent frostbite, a stark contrast to the large ears of its modern relative, the African elephant. Even its teeth were specialized. High-crowned and ridged with hard enamel, they were perfect for grinding the tough, silica-rich grasses of the steppe, which wore down teeth relentlessly. A mammoth would go through 6 sets of molars in its lifetime, a testament to the abrasive nature of its diet. These magnificent animals lived in complex matriarchal herds, led by a wise, experienced female who held the knowledge of migration routes, water sources, and safe pastures in her immense memory. The herd was a family unit, mothers, daughters, sisters, and young calves, all bound by strong social bonds, communicating in low-frequency rumbles that could travel for miles across the open landscape. A secret language of the steppe, bulls were often solitary or lived in loose bachelor groups, only joining the herds during the annual rut. The life of a mammoth was one of constant movement, a relentless journey across the vastness of the steppe in search of food, water, and safety. They were the architects of their own environment, their feeding habits helping to maintain the grassland ecosystems they depended upon. For hundreds of thousands of years, they roamed this world, supremely adapted and largely unchallenged. And into this world, late in the Pleistocene, came a new and very different creature. Homo sapiens, anatomically modern humans, merged from Africa and began their great dispersal across the globe. They were not the first hominins to encounter mammoths. Neanderthals and other archaic humans had coexisted with them for millennia, and evidence suggests they too hunted these giants on occasion. But Homo sapiens brought with them a unique combination of cognitive abilities, technological innovation, and social complexity that would change the dynamic forever. They were intelligent, adaptable, and capable of profound abstract thought and planning. They were toolmakers without parallel, and their greatest tool was their ability to cooperate on a scale and with a sophistication unseen in the animal kingdom. These early humans were physically slight compared to the behemoths they would come to pursue. They had no natural armor, no claws, no fangs. Their survival depended not on brute strength, but on wit, endurance, and unity. They were persistent hunters, capable of tracking prey over staggering distances, using their unparalleled stamina to exhaust faster, stronger animals. They were observers, learning the intricate habits of their prey, predicting their movements, and understanding their weaknesses. And they were innovators, developing a toolkit that would become the key to unlocking the resources of the mammoth steppe. Their world was one of profound intimacy with nature. They read the signs of the land as we read words on a page, the track of a mammoth calf in the mud, the freshness of dung, the direction of the wind carrying scent, the distant rumble of a herd on the move. Their lives were woven into the fabric of the ecosystem, not as dominators, but as participants in a dangerous and magnificent dance of survival. The mammoth was not just food. It was a central figure in their cosmology, their art, and their spiritual life. To bring down such a creature was an event of monumental significance, a feat that would fuel a community for weeks, provide materials for tools, shelter, and clothing, and become the stuff of legend, told and retold around the fire for generations. This is the story of that encounter. It is a tale of two species, one ancient and mighty, the other new and ingenious, whose paths crossed on the windy plains of the Ice Age world. It is a story of survival, of desperation, of brilliance, and of respect. It is a narrative pieced together from fragments: a spear point lodged in a rib cage, a breathtaking cave painting, a circle of mammoth bones arranged by human hands, the frozen remains of a giant emerging from the melting permafrost. Each fragment is a clue, and together they allow us to reconstruct one of humanity's first great adventures, the hunt for the mammoth. This is not a story of wanton destruction, but one of a deep and necessary relationship that shaped our ancestors and left an indelible mark on the world they inhabited. It is a journey back to a time when humans stood small upon a great earth, looked up at a walking mountain, and dared to dream of bringing it down. The mammoth steppe was not a barren, frozen wasteland. It was a thriving, complex biome, a vast sea of grasses, sedges, and herbaceous plants that supported an astonishing array of megafauna, the likes of which the world has not seen since. To understand the hunt, one must first understand the rich and interconnected web of life in which both hunter and prey were enmeshed. This was a world of giants, a true Serengeti of the Ice Age, where the mammoth was the keystone, but far from the only player in a dramatic and dynamic ecosystem. Imagine the horizon, not with trees, but with an endless, rolling expanse of blonde and green grasses, swaying in a wind that carried the scent of earth and snow. In the summer, the sun would hang low in the sky for nearly 24 hours, triggering an explosive growth of vegetation. This was the season of plenty, a short, intense burst of life that had to sustain the great herds through the long, dark winter. The mammoths were the most visible engineers of this landscape, their feeding habits knocking over trees, stripping bark, and fertilizing the ground with their immense droppings, helped keep the forests at bay and maintain the open grassland. They were mobile landscapers on a continental scale. Alongside the mammoths, other giants roamed. The woolly rhinoceros, a tank-like beast covered in thick, shaggy fur, and sporting a massive horn on its snout, browsed on tougher shrubs and plants. Great herds of bison, larger and hardier than their modern descendants, thundered across the plains, their numbers so vast they could darken the landscape. Giant elk, known as Irish elks, though they ranged far beyond Ireland, carried antlers with a spread of over 12 feet, an impressive and seemingly cumbersome display of dominance and health. Horses, small, stocky, and resilient, ran in nimble bands, their hooves drumming a constant rhythm on the hard ground. There were predators, too, that rivaled and often surpassed the human hunters. The cave lion, a formidable subspecies larger than the African lion, was an apex predator, capable of bringing down a young or infirm mammoth. Packs of hyenas, their powerful jaws capable of crushing bone, scavenged the kills of others and hunted in their own right, their eerie whoops and laughs echoing through the night. Dire wolves, more robust than grey wolves, worked together in efficient packs. And in the far north, the saber-toothed cat, Smilodon, with its iconic elongated canots, specialized in delivering a precise killing bite to the throat of its large prey. This was the competitive arena into which humans stepped. They were not the top predators. They were newcomers, interlopers, who had to find a niche amidst these powerful and established carnivores. The climate of the Pleistocene was not statically cold. It was a roller coaster of glacial and interglacial periods. During a glacial maximum, the ice sheets would expand, locking up vast quantities of the world's water and causing sea levels to drop by hundreds of feet, creating land bridges like Beringia that allowed species including humans to migrate between continents. The air was dry, and temperatures could plummet to extremes we can scarcely imagine. Winters were interminable, with howling blizzards and months of near-total darkness. Survival itself was a victory. It was into this demanding, magnificent world that human bands migrated. Their survival depended on a deep, intuitive knowledge of this ecosystem. They were not just hunting mammoths, they were part of a complex food web. They would hunt the smaller game, the horses, the reindeer, the bison that were more readily available. They would gather roots, berries, and bird eggs when in season. They learned the migratory patterns of the herds, which were as predictable as the seasons, moving to higher ground in the summer and into more sheltered valleys in the winter. They knew where the freshwater springs were, even when the surface was frozen solid. They understood the behavior of every animal, not just as prey, but as competitors and sometimes as threats. The presence of other predators was a constant factor. A human band might track a mammoth herd for days, only to find that a pride of cave lions had made a kill, forcing them to wait as scavengers or abandon the effort altogether. A successful mammoth hunt would attract every major carnivore for miles around. The aftermath of a kill was not a time of rest, but a time of heightened vigilance and defense. Humans had to secure their hard-won prize against hyenas, wolves, and lions, often having to camp right on the kill site to protect it. This constant negotiation with the ecosystem's other apex predators shaped human behavior, fostering a need for strong, coordinated defense and a willingness to engage in dangerous confrontations to protect their vital resources. This tapestry of life, the immense, productive steppe, the great herds of herbivores, and the fierce competition among predators, forms the essential backdrop for the mammoth hunt. Humans did not operate in a vacuum. Their quest for the largest land mammal was a calculated risk, a high-stakes endeavor undertaken within a world teeming with both opportunity and mortal danger. They had to be smarter, more cooperative, and more resilient than any creature they shared the landscape with. The mammoth was the ultimate prize, not just for the sheer volume of resources it provided, but for the statement it made, that humans, despite their physical fragility, had arrived, and they could compete at the very top of the Ice Age world. Before a single spear was ever thrown, the hunt began in the mind. The successful pursuit of a mammoth was not an act of reckless bravery. It was a cerebral endeavor, a product of accumulated knowledge, meticulous planning, and a spiritual worldview that saw the animal not merely as prey, but as a conscious, powerful being to be approached with both cunning and respect. The hunters of the Pleistocene were scientists of the natural world, and their laboratory was the entire mammoth steppe. This deep knowledge was passed down through generations, woven into the very fabric of culture through stories, songs, and ritual. An elder's memory was the tribe's most valuable library. He would recount the great hunts of his youth, describing not just the kill, but the weather that day, the behavior of the herd, the lay of the land where the ambush was set. Young boys learned by listening, by observing, and by practicing on smaller game. They learned to identify individual mammoths, the old matriarch with a broken tusk, the aggressive young bull with a distinctive swirl in his coat, understanding that each animal had its own personality and place. Within the herd's hierarchy, this was critical intelligence. Targeting a nervous young female would provoke a different reaction from the herd than targeting a confident, experienced matriarch. The hunter's understanding of mammoth physiology was precise and practical, gained from close observation and the butchering of carcasses. They knew exactly where to strike to cause a lethal wound. They knew that a mammoth's thick hide was toughest on its back and head, but thinner and more vulnerable in the flanks, behind the ears, and in the soft underbelly. They knew that a spear thrust into the lungs would cause a slow, debilitating death as the great beast drowned in its own blood, while a hit to the heart would bring it down more quickly. They understood the mammoth's immense strength, but also its limitations, its poor eyesight, its keen sense of smell, and its potential for panic. This knowledge directly informed their strategy. The choice of how to hunt was dictated by season, terrain, and the composition of the herd. There was no single technique, but a repertoire of methods, each selected for the specific circumstances. One primary strategy was the ambush at a strategic location. Hunters would use their intimate knowledge of the land to predict where the mammoths would go. They might wait at a known river crossing point, where the animals would be slowed and mired in the water and mud, making them vulnerable. They might funnel a herd into a narrow, steep-walled ravine where their size became a disadvantage, trapping them in a confined space. They might use natural features like cliffs, but there is little evidence for the popular notion of driving whole herds over them. Such an act would be incredibly wasteful, destroying tons of precious meat and valuable resources. A more likely scenario was using a cliff to separate an individual from the herd, or to create a dead end where the animal could be cornered. Another, perhaps more common strategy, was the persistence hunt. While we often associate this method with warmer climates, a modified version could have been effective on the steppe. A small, highly fit team of hunters would identify a target upon a young, old, or injured animal and begin a relentless pursuit. They would not need to outsprint the mammoth, but simply outlast it. Using their superior thermoregulation, the ability to cool themselves through sweating, and tracking skills, they would keep the animal moving, preventing it from resting, feeding, or drinking. Over hours, or even days, the massive creature, whose great bulk required constant fuel and which could easily overheat, would become exhausted, dehydrated, and disoriented, eventually succumbing to its human shadows, who could finally move in for the kill. The most sophisticated and cooperative method was the large-scale driven hunt. This was not a casual affair but a complex communal operation, requiring the participation of the entire band, or even multiple bands working together. It began with days of reconnaissance to locate a suitable herd. Then, teams would be sent out to strategically place brush piles, or use torches to create a smokescreen, guiding the mammoths in a desired direction. Others, often including women and older children, would act as beaters, shouting, waving hides, and creating noise to panic the herd and drive them toward the chosen killing grounder, natural trap like a bog, a box canyon, or a purpose-built enclosure. The success of any of these strategies hinged on an element beyond mere physical technique, the spiritual preparation. For these early humans, the world was alive with spirit. The mammoth was not a dumb beast, but a powerful entity, a master of the animals in its own right. To take its life was a grave transaction that required permission and necessitated reciprocity. Shamans or hunt leaders would perform rituals before the hunt, seeking a vision or an omen that would grant them favor. They might leave offerings at sacred sites or chant prayers to the spirits of the hunt. This spiritual relationship is powerfully etched onto the walls of caves like Chauvet and Lascaux. The magnificent paintings of mammoths are not simple depictions of food. They are profound, mystical portraits. By painting the animal often with spears striking its vital areas, the artists may have been practicing a form of sympathetic magic, attempting to exert control over the spirit of the beast and ensure a successful hunt in the physical world. The act of hunting was thus a sacred covenant. Every part of the animal was used not just out of practicality, but out of respect. To waste any part would be a profound insult to the spirit that had given itself to the people. Therefore, the mind of the hunter was a fusion of scientist, strategist, and priest. He carried a map of the land in his head, a dossier on his prey in his memory, and a sacred duty in his heart. The hunt was the ultimate expression of this synthesis, testament to human intellect, cooperation, and their profound connection to the world they were a part of. The spear was the tool that delivered the final blow, but it was the mind that truly brought the mammoth down. To confront a creature as immense and powerful as a mammoth, early humans could not rely on strength alone. Their success was forged in fire and flint, born from an ever-advancing technological revolution that provided them with the tools to bridge the staggering physical gap between themselves and their prey. The arsenal of the Paleolithic hunter was a masterpiece of ingenuity, each weapon and tool meticulously designed for a specific purpose in the complex and dangerous ballet of the hunt. This was not a crude collection of rocks and sticks, but a sophisticated toolkit that represented the cutting edge of Stone Age technology. The crown jewel of this arsenal was the spear, but this was far from a simple sharpened stick. It was a system, a modular weapon consisting of two key components, the shaft and the point. The shaft, or foreshaft, was typically made from a strong, straight-grained wood, like yew or ash, carefully seasoned and hardened in fire to give it strength and rigidity. Its length was a balance of necessity and practicality, long enough to provide leverage and keep the hunter at a safer distance from the mammoth's thrashing limbs and tusks, but not so long as to be unwieldy. Some may have been as long as 2 meters or more. The true innovation, however, was the projectile point. This was where the flint-knapper's art reached its zenith. Using a process of precise, controlled percussion and pressure flaking, skilled craftspeople would shape a core of high-quality flint, chert, or obsidian into a lethal, razor-sharp point. The most iconic and effective design for big game hunting was the leaf point, or later, the Solutrean point, a breathtakingly thin, bifacially worked blade that was both strong and incredibly sharp, capable of penetrating the thick hide of a mammoth. These points were not simply tied to the shaft. They were hafted using an advanced adhesive technology. The creation of the glue was a chemical process in its own right. Pitch, collected from birch trees, would be heated and mixed with other substances like charcoal or bone ash to create a tough, waterproof adhesive that would set hard as rock. This pitch was used to secure the point into a notch carved into the top of the wooden shaft. Then, to provide immense tensile strength, the joint was bound tightly with sinew, tough tendons from along the spine of a reindeer or other large animal. As the sinew dried, it would shrink, pulling the bindings impossibly tight, and the natural collagen within the sinew would act as a glue itself, creating a bond that could withstand the tremendous impact of striking a mammoth. This composite spearwood, stone, adhesive, and sinew was a product of complex thought and multi-step planning. It required knowledge of materials gathered from across the landscape, from different seasons, and processed with specific techniques. It was a symbol of human intelligence, an extension of their will into the physical world. But the spear was not the only tool. The toolkit for a mammoth hunt was extensive and varied. Knives and scrapers made from smaller, sharper flakes were essential for the critical work of butchering. A large kill meant tons of meat, hide, and fat that needed to be processed quickly before predators and spoilage set in. Heavy-duty chopping tools, or hand axes, were used to break apart the massive skeleton and access the nutritious marrow within the giant bones. Beyond weapons and butchery tools, technology played a role in the hunt itself. The use of fire was likely a key strategic element. Torches could be used to drive herds, to create smokescreens that masked human scent, or to corral panicked animals into natural traps. The ability to create fire on demand, possibly using iron pyrite to strike sparks against flint, was a crucial tactical advantage. Another revolutionary invention was the spear thrower, or otlot. This device, a short rod of wood or antler with a hook at one end, acted as an extension of the hunter's arm. By effectively lengthening the lever, it allowed a hunter to throw a spear with significantly greater velocity and force, and with more accuracy than with his arm alone. The otlot transformed the spear from a thrusting weapon into a true projectile weapon, increasing the hunter's range and, most importantly, his margin of safety. The spear could now be launched from a greater distance, with enough power to drive the point deep into the mammoth's vitals. The development of these technologies did not happen overnight. It was a slow, cumulative process of innovation, experimentation, and passed down knowledge. Each refinement, a sharper point, a stronger adhesive, a more effective throwing technique, increased the odds of success incrementally. This technological arms race was driven by necessity. Facing the ultimate prey in an unforgiving world, early humans responded not by growing larger claws or stronger muscles, but by using their greatest asset, their intellect. They turned the elements of their world-stone, wood, bone, and fire into extensions of their own bodies, crafting an arsenal that allowed them to step onto the same field as the giants of the Ice Age, and not just compete, but triumph. Let us now weave together the threads we have spun: the knowledge of the beast, the strategy of the mind, and the technology of the hand, and witness the event itself. Let us imagine, in detail, the unfolding of a large-scale driven hunt, a supreme act of coordination that represents the pinnacle of Paleolithic human cooperation. This is not a generic tale, but a reconstruction based on archaeological evidence, a journey into a single, fateful day on the Mammoth Steppe. The air is cold and sharp, carrying the scent of frozen earth and distant snow. Dawn is a pale, grey smear on the eastern horizon. The band has been preparing for days. Scouts returned 3 suns ago, speaking of a small herd, a dozen individuals, including 2 young calves, and an old female with a pronounced limp, grazing in the valley 2 days' journey to the south. The decision was made. The entire camp is mobilized, not just the prime hunters, but every able-bodied person who can play a role. The stakes are unimaginably high. Failure means weeks of hardship. Success means survival. warmth, and celebration for the entire community. The journey to the chosen site is made in a tense silence, broken only by the crunch of feet on frost and the occasional low murmur. They carry their tools, bundles of spears, atlatls, knives of flint wrapped in leather, and coils of sinew rope. They reach the killing ground by afternoon of the second day. The site was chosen long ago by their ancestors, a natural sinkhole, partially obscured by brush, that opens into a deep, muddy bog. The approach to it is flanked by low, rocky hills, creating a natural funnel. This is the place. The work begins immediately, under the direction of the hunt leader, an old man whose body is scarred but whose eyes miss nothing. Teams move with quiet efficiency. Some strengthen the natural funnel by building makeshift barriers of piled brush and mammoth bones left from a hunt seasons past. Others, the most experienced hunters, take positions on the high ground overlooking the funnel, their spears and atlatls ready. They are the ambush party, the ones who will launch the first strikes and guide the herd's panic. A third group, the drivers, prepares to move into position behind the herd, miles away. They carry no spears, only torches and noisemakers' drums, made of hides and wooden clappers. The night is spent in nervous anticipation. There is little sleep. Stories are told in hushed tones, not for entertainment, but for instruction. The old man traces maps in the dirt, reiterating everyone's role. There is ritual. A shaman burns herbs, chanting prayers to the spirits of the land and the mammoths, asking for permission, offering respect. The air is thick with a potent mixture of fear, excitement, and solemn purpose. Before first light, the drivers move out. It takes them hours to circle wide, using the wind to mask their scent, to get behind the unsuspecting herd. The ambush party is already in place, lying motionless on the cold rock, their bodies blending into the stone. Time seems to stretch and warp. Then, a distant signal, a single column of smoke from a torch, barely visible against the brightening sky. The drive begins. The drivers light their torches, the smoke creating a shifting, terrifying wall. They begin to shout, to beat their drums, to crash their clappers together. The noise is not loud by modern standards, but it is alien, unpredictable, and menacing. The mammoths, grazing peacefully, become alert. Heads rise, trunks sniff the air. They smell the smoke, hear the cacophony. The matriarch issues a low, concerned rumble. The herd clusters together instinctively. The drivers advance slowly, relentlessly, their lines spread wide, herding the confused animals, not by force, but by manipulating their fear. The mammoths move away from the noise and fire, their pace quickening from a walk to a nervous trot. The drivers skillfully guide them, using the lay of the land, toward the mouth of the funnel. The ambush party on the ridges remains perfectly still, holding their breath. The ground begins to tremble. The sound is first a low thunder, then a deafening rumble as the panicked herd enters the funnel, their sheer mass shaking the earth. Dust and snow fly into the air. The old matriarch, wise and experienced, seems to sense the trap. She trumpets a warning, trying to turn the herd, but the pressure from behind and the terrifying sights and sounds from the drivers push them forward. The terrain narrows. The panic turns to sheer terror. The herd stampedes into the bottleneck. This is the moment. The hunt leader gives a sharp, piercing cry. The ambush party rises as one. Spears are fitted into atlatls. There is no wasted motion. They take aim not at the largest, most protected adults, but at the vulnerable flanks and underbellies of the animals, at the edges of the herd, or at the young calves. The atlatls whip through the air, unleashing their deadly projectiles with a force no human arm could achieve. Thwump, thwump, the sound of stone points striking thick hide and muscle is a dull, sickening percussion beneath the cacophony of trumpets and thundering feet. A young bull stumbles, a spear deep in its side. A female tries to protect her calf, taking a spear meant for it. The herd's panic becomes a chaotic rout. The leaders, blinded by fear and the press of bodies behind them, plunge into the bog at the end of the funnel. The deceptively solid crust of earth gives way. The struggle is nightmarish. A mammoth, immense weight becomes its enemy. The more it struggles in the deep, cold muck, the deeper it sinks. Trumpets of agony and fear fill the air. The hunters do not celebrate. They move in quickly and ruthlessly, now with handheld spears, finishing the work. It is dangerous, bloody work. A mortally wounded mammoth is still unimaginably powerful. Tusks swing wildly, trunks flail, but the hunters work in teams, distracting and striking. The dance is one of controlled violence and precise movement. Finally, it is over. The sounds of panic fade, replaced by heavy breathing, the soft groans of dying giants, and the calls of hunters securing the area. 3 mammoths are trapped in the bog. 2 others lie dead from spear wounds on solid ground. The rest of the herd has escaped. The hunters look at each other, their faces splattered with mud and blood, their eyes wide with the adrenaline of the event. There is a moment of sheer, stunned silence. Then, a single shout of triumph and relief echoes across the killing ground, and is soon taken up by everyone. They have done it. The gamble of a community has paid off. The mountain of meat and resources before them is almost incomprehensible in its scale. But the work, the most immense labor of all, has only just begun. The triumph of the kill is immediately overshadowed by the staggering reality of the task that lies before the band. A single mammoth represents several tons of resources. 3 of them represent an almost unimaginable bounty and an equally immense logistical challenge. There is no time for prolonged celebration. The air, once filled with the thunder of the stampede and the cries of the hunt, is now thick with the scent of blood and the urgent, coordinated activity of an entire community swinging into action. The kill site must be secured, the mammoths processed, and the precious resources protected from the legion of competitors that will already have caught the scent of blood on the wind. The first order of business is defense. The trumpeting and the smell of blood will have acted as a dinner bell for every large predator within miles. Teams of hunters, still buzzing with adrenaline from the chase, now form a protective perimeter around the site. They are armed with spears and firebrands, their eyes scanning the surrounding ridges and brush. They are not there to hunt, but to guard. The low growl of a cave lion or the chilling laugh of a hyena clan is a constant reminder that they are not alone in their claim. This vigil will be maintained in shifts for the entire duration of the butchery, a tense, watchful standoff against the true lords of the Ice Age. Meanwhile, the master butchers move in. These are not necessarily the strongest hunters, but the most knowledgeable, those who understand the anatomy of the giant inside and out. Their flint knives, scrapers, and choppers are about to undergo a severe test. The process is methodical and efficient, a skill honed over a lifetime. It begins with the arduous task of removing the hide. Using sharp stone tools, they make precise incisions along the belly and limbs. Then, using tools of antler or heavy bone as levers and wedges, and with many hands pulling, the incredibly thick, heavy hide is painstakingly peeled back. This hide is a treasure in itself, destined to become blankets, clothing, and coverings for shelters. Next comes the dismemberment. This is a task of Herculean proportions. The mammoth's limbs are as thick as tree trunks. Using heavy stone chopping tools and great strength, the butchers work at the joints, severing tendons and ligaments, eventually separating the legs from the massive torso. The ribs are cracked open to access the internal organs, the heart. Liver and lungs are prized delicacies, rich in vitamins and nutrients, and are often consumed first, sometimes even raw, in an immediate, ritualistic feast of celebration that renews the energy of the exhausted processors. The meat is cut into manageable strips and slabs. Much of it cannot be consumed immediately. Here, the climate itself becomes a tool. The freezing air is a natural refrigerator. The meat is laid out on racks of bone and wood to freeze solid. Some of it may be cached stored in pits dug into the permafrost and covered with heavy rocks to safeguard it from scavengers, a savings account of food for the depths of winter. This practice of catching is a testament to foresight and planning, an ability to think beyond immediate hunger. But the mammoth is more than just meat. Every single part is utilized, a testament to a deep-seated cultural ethic of respect and practicality. The immense skull is cracked open for the brain, which is used in the tanning process to soften the hides. The long shaggy hair is gathered to be spun into cordage or used as insulation. The great tusks are perhaps the most versatile prize. Using grinding stones and patient, abrasive sand, they are carved and shaped into everything from deadly projectile points to robust needles. From exquisite figurines, the world's first R2 heavy-duty tools used for digging and levering. The bones are not discarded. The giant leg bones and ribs are used as structural supports for substantial dwellings. Skulls are incorporated into the walls of semi-permanent camps. Smaller bones and splinters are sharpened into awls and pins. Even the tendons are carefully harvested, dried and split, they become incredibly strong sinew for cordage, for binding tool heads, and for sewing. The fat is rendered over fires, providing fuel for lamps that push back the endless winter darkness, and used as a preservative for other foods. For days, the kill site is a hive of industry, a factory in the wilderness. It is a scene of hard, bloody, exhausting labor, but it is also a scene of joyous community. The success of the hunt ensures the survival of all men, women, children, the elderly. As the work continues, there is feasting. Great pits are dug and lined with hot stones. Sections of meat, wrapped in the mammoth's own hide, are slow-cooked in these earth ovens, producing a rich, succulent feast. The stories of the hunt are already being told and retold. The actions of the drivers and the spearmen exaggerated and immortalized. The shaman offers thanks to the spirit of the mammoth, ensuring the cycle of respect and reciprocity is complete. The mountain of meat is conquered not by brute force, but by organized, shared labor, transforming a moment of violent death into a prolonged festival of life and sustenance for the entire human band. The impact of a successful mammoth hunt reverberated far beyond the immediate satiation of hunger. It echoed through the very structure of society, the development of technology, the expression of art, and the spiritual worldview of early human bands. The mammoth was not merely a source of calories. It was a foundational pillar upon which the survival and cultural complexity of Paleolithic life was built. Its gift was total, transforming every aspect of human existence in the harsh Ice Age world. The most immediate and tangible effect was the gift of time and stability. A hunt for smaller game, reindeer, horses, or bison was a constant, daily necessity. It consumed immense energy for a relatively modest return. The procurement of a single mammoth, by contrast, was a massive one-time energy investment that paid dividends for weeks and even months afterward. This caloric windfall created a temporary surplus. For the first time, the band was not living hand-to-mouth, constantly on the brink of starvation. This surplus granted them a precious resource, leisure time. This time was not spent in idleness. It was the engine of cultural and technological acceleration. Freed from the relentless daily grind of foraging, people could engage in activities that were not directly related to immediate survival. Elders had time to teach the young in more detail, passing on intricate knowledge of toolmaking, storytelling, and navigation. Artisans could experiment with new techniques, refining their flint-knapping skills, developing more effective adhesives, or exploring the artistic possibilities of ivory and bone. This period of stability allowed for the gestation of more complex technologies and the elaboration of cultural traditions. The mammoth, therefore, indirectly funded the very innovations that would make hunting them more efficient in the future. This stability also facilitated the creation of more substantial settlements. While many groups were highly nomadic, following the seasonal migrations of herds, a mammoth kill site could become a semi-permanent home base for an extended period. The most striking evidence of this is the discovery of mammoth bone dwellings, particularly across the plains of Eastern Europe and Asia. Using the enormous skulls, jaws, tusks, and long bones of many mammoths, these communities constructed impressive circular or oval huts. The bones were stacked and woven together into a sturdy framework, which was then covered with animal hides, sod, and perhaps even layers of moss for insulation. A central hearth would provide warmth and light. These structures were not temporary windbreaks. They were homes, offering unprecedented protection from the brutal elements and dangerous predators. They represent a shift towards a more settled existence, made possible by the abundance provided by the mammoth. The mammoth's influence extended deeply into the spiritual and artistic realm. The sheer scale and power of the animal made it an awe-inspiring figure, naturally leading to its prominence in Paleolithic art. The magnificent paintings in the caves of Chauvet, Lascaux, and Ruffignac are not simple hunting manuals. They are something far more profound. The artists captured the mammoth's essence: its shaggy coat, its high-domed head, its intelligent eye with a breathtaking sensitivity and respect. By painting them deep within the sacred, hidden chambers of the earth, they were perhaps seeking to commune with the spirit of the beast, to honor its power, or to ensure its continued abundance through sympathetic magic. The art was not confined to cave walls. The mammoth's own ivory provided the canvas. Using flint burins and gravers, artists sculpted tiny, exquisite figurines of mammoths and other animals, their forms fluid and instantly recognizable. They engraved intricate patterns and scenes onto plaques of ivory. This mobilization of artistic effort, requiring time, skill, and a deep well of symbolic thought, was again a luxury afforded by the mammoth's bounty. It speaks to a rich inner life, a need to make sense of the world and humanity's place within it, a cognitive complexity that defines our species. Finally, the mammoth hunt was a powerful social glue. The successful execution of such a complex, cooperative endeavor required immense trust, communication, and shared purpose. It reinforced social bonds and hierarchies. The successful hunt leader gained prestige. The skilled flint-knapper who made the lethal point was valued. Everyone, from the swiftest driver to the weakest child who gathered brush for the fire, had a role to play and shared in the success. The subsequent feasting was a powerful act of social cohesion, reinforcing equality and mutual obligation within the group. The stories told around the fire of the great hunt became the mythology of the people, a shared history that strengthened their collective identity. In essence, the mammoth was a catalyst. Its physical body provided food, shelter, tools, and fuel, but its metaphysical impact was just as profound. It gave humans the time to think, to create, to build, and to dream. It forced them to cooperate on a grand scale, forging stronger societies. It inspired them to create some of humanity's first and most powerful art. The relationship was a sacred cycle. The hunt supported the culture, and the culture, through ritual and art, honored the hunt. The mammoth was a force of nature that helped shape human nature, pushing our ancestors toward greater technological sophistication, social complexity, and spiritual depth in the challenging theater of the Ice Age world. How can we, separated by 15,000 years or more, possibly know the intricate details of this ancient relationship between humans and mammoths? We were not there to witness the driven hunt, to feel the tremble of the earth, or to share in the mammoth feast. Our understanding is not drawn from written records or eyewitness accounts, but from a far more subtle and fragmented archive, the earth itself. The story is painstakingly reconstructed from physical clues, a silent language of stone, bone, and art that archaeologists have learned to decipher. This evidence forms the bedrock of our narrative, a puzzle whose pieces are scattered across continents and buried deep in time. The most direct and dramatic evidence comes from kill sites and butchery sites. These are locations where the stone tools of humans are found in direct association with mammoth remains. The most compelling finds are mammoth bones, ribs, and even vertebrae that bear the unmistakable marks of human activity. The impact fracture on a stone spear point, its tip broken off from the force of striking a hard object, found nestled between the ribs of a mammoth skeleton, is a smoking gun. It is a frozen moment of the hunt, a snapshot of violence and purpose preserved for millennia. Even without the weapon itself, the bones tell their own story. Under a microscope, the surface of a bone can reveal a history of its treatment. Cut marks, left by stone knives during the process of dismembering and filleting, are fine. Parallel striations, chop marks, from heavy tools used to break apart joints and access marrow, are broader and deeper. Scrape marks indicate the thorough removal of every last bit of tissue and sinew from the bone. By analyzing the pattern and location of these marks, archaeologists can reconstruct the entire butchery process, from skinning to dismemberment to the extraction of marrow, with astonishing precision. They can tell if the hunters were efficient, if they had a detailed knowledge of anatomy, and even which parts of the animal they prioritized. Beyond the sites of death, we find evidence of life built from the mammoth. The mammoth bone dwellings of Eastern Europe, from sites like Mazyrik in Ukraine, are perhaps the most breathtaking examples. These structures, made from the skulls, mandibles, and long bones of dozens of individual mammoths, are not accidental. The bones were deliberately selected and arranged. Skulls were placed for stability. Tusks may have been used to create arched entrances, and giant scapulae might have served as benches or work surfaces. The sheer number of mammoths represented, and the incredible labor required to transport and assemble these bones, is a powerful testament to the importance of the mammoth in these people's lives. It suggests a deep familiarity with the animal, and a cultural tradition that had turned its remains into architecture. Then there is the art. The cave paintings of France and Spain, and the intricate portable art carved from ivory, form a different kind of evidence. They are not a photographic record, but a symbolic one. They tell us how these people saw the mammoth. The incredible accuracy of the depictions, the shape of the head, the line of the back, The depiction of the trunk and tusks proves an intimate, observational knowledge. The fact that they chose to represent them in places of deep spiritual significance indicates that the mammoth held a place of power and importance in their worldview. The art moves us beyond the practicalities of survival and into the mind of Paleolithic people, revealing awe, respect, and a desire to capture the essence of this magnificent creature. Other lines of evidence add further layers. The analysis of paleoclimate data from ice cores and soil samples tells us what the environment was like, how cold it was, what plants grew, and how the landscape changed. This helps us understand the challenges humans and mammoths faced. The study of mammoth teeth can reveal their diet, their health, and even their age at death, helping to determine if humans were selectively hunting certain demographics, like young or old animals. Occasionally, nature provides a miracle of preservation. The frozen mammoth carcasses recovered from the permafrost of Siberia. While these rarely show direct evidence of human hunting, they provide an unparalleled window into the animal itself, its physiology, its DNA, its last meals still preserved in its stomach. They allow us to see the shaggy coat, touch the leathery skin, and look upon the face of a creature that walked the earth with our ancestors, making the abstract reality of the past shockingly immediate. Each of these pieces of evidence, the cut bone, the shattered spear point, the painted wall, the frozen carcasses, a single word in a long-lost language. Archaeologists are the translators, patiently assembling these words into sentences, the sentences into paragraphs, and the paragraphs into the epic story of a time when humans, armed with little more than intelligence and cooperation, dared to hunt the greatest giants of the Ice Age world. It is a story written not on paper, but in stone and earth, waiting to be read. The world of the mammoth and the mammoth hunter was not destined to last. The Great Ice Age, with its pulsating glaciers and expansive mammoth steppes, was drawing to a close. The story of the mammoth's disappearance is one of the most enduring mysteries in paleontology, a complex tapestry woven from threads of climate change, human expansion, and ecological transformation. It was not a single event, but a protracted process of decline, a fading of the giants from a world that was changing too rapidly for them to adapt. The primary architect of this change was the climate. The Pleistocene epoch was characterized by its dramatic climatic swings, but the transition into our current Holocene epoch was different. Around 15,000 years ago, a sustained period of global warming began. The massive continental ice sheets started to melt, retreating northwards. Sea levels rose, inundating coastal plains and severing land bridges like Beringia, which had connected Asia and North America. This warming fundamentally altered the very foundation of the mammoth's existence. The mammoth steppe, the rich, cold, dry grasslands that had stretched across continents, began to fragment and change. Warmer temperatures and increased precipitation allowed for the expansion of forests. Deciduous trees like birch and pine began to encroach upon the open steppe. In wetter areas, peat bogs and tundra, with their less nutritious vegetation, began to replace the protein-rich grasses. The mammoth steppe was being replaced by a mosaic of less productive habitats. For a megaherbivore supremely adapted to grazing on specific grasses across vast open spaces, this was a catastrophe. Their feeding habits helped maintain the grassland, and as their numbers declined, the forests advanced even faster, creating a vicious cycle of habitat loss. The world was simply becoming too warm, too wet, and too wooded for a creature built for cold, dry, open country. Into this changing, stressed world, humans continued to expand. Our species had perfected its hunting techniques and social organization. Their populations were growing, and they were spreading into every conceivable corner of the globe. The debate among scientists is fierce. To what degree did this growing, technologically sophisticated human population contribute to the mammoth's extinction? The overkill hypothesis argues that humans were the primary driver. Proponents point to the telling correlation between the arrival of humans in new territories and the subsequent rapid disappearance of megafauna. In North America, for example, the Clovis culture, with its distinctive fluted spear points, appears in the archaeological record around 13,000 years ago. Shortly thereafter, the continent witnessed a wave of extinctions that wiped out mammoths, mastodons, giant ground sloths, and other large mammals. The argument is that these animals, having evolved without humans as predators, were naive and vulnerable. Human hunters, with their coordinated techniques and advanced weapons, could have placed an unsustainable pressure on already stressed populations, hunting them to extinction. However, many scientists favor a more nuanced view, a synergistic effect. They argued that climate change was the crucial factor that shrank and degraded the mammoths' habitat, breaking their populations into smaller, isolated groups. This fragmentation made them vastly more vulnerable. In this scenario, human hunting was not the sole cause, but the final, critical blow. A large, interconnected population can withstand a certain level of predation, but small, isolated herds, struggling to find food in a shrinking and unfamiliar habitat, could not withstand even moderate hunting pressure. The loss of a few key matriarchs, the repositories of knowledge about migration routes and water sources, could doom an entire herd. Humans may have been the precise, efficient predator that tipped these fragile populations over the edge. Other factors likely played a role. The shrinking habitat could have increased genetic diversity loss through inbreeding in small groups. The changing vegetation may have led to nutritional stress. Diseases brought by humans or their dogs, hyperdisease hypothesis, is another possibility, though evidence is scant. The extinction was not instantaneous. It happened in waves, at different times in different places. Woolly mammoths on the mainland of Eurasia and North America were mostly gone by about 10,000 years ago, but isolated populations held on. A dwarfed subspecies survived on Wrangel Island in the Arctic Ocean until as recently as 4,000 years ago, coexisting with the Great Pyramids of Egypt. These last survivors, isolated from humans and the worst of the climate change on a remote Arctic refuge, are a poignant reminder that the story was complex and played out differently across the globe. The disappearance of the mammoth and the other megafauna marked the end of an era. It dramatically altered ecosystems and left a void that has never been filled. For humans, it meant the end of a way of life centered around the greatest of quarries. They had to adapt to a new world, one without the walking mountains that had provided them with so much. The hunt faded into legend, the skills were slowly forgotten, and the profound spiritual relationship with the mammoth transformed into memory and myth, leaving behind only bones, art, and an enduring question about our own role in the passing of the giants. The physical presence of the mammoth vanished from the world, but its shadow stretched long across human history, leaving an indelible imprint on our species' memory, mythology, and even the trajectory of our development. The end of the mammoth hunt did not erase the mammoth from the human story. It simply transformed its role from a living reality into a powerful and enduring legacy that helped shape the world that came after. In the immediate aftermath of the extinctions, human societies faced a new reality. The loss of such a foundational resource must have been a profound cultural and economic shock. The societies that had built their homes from mammoth bones, their rituals around its hunt, and their diets around its meat had to adapt with remarkable speed. This necessity became a catalyst for innovation. The focus of hunting shifted to smaller, swifter game like red deer, reindeer, and aurochs. This may have accelerated the development of new technologies like the bow and arrow, which offered greater range and accuracy for hunting more dispersed and wary animals. In some regions, the decreasing reliability of large game hunting may have encouraged a greater emphasis on gathering, fishing, and the eventual development of agriculture. The challenge of a world without giants pushed human ingenuity in new directions, ultimately contributing to the diverse subsistence strategies that characterized the Holocene. The mammoth itself did not fade into oblivion. It lived on in the oral traditions of peoples around the world. Long after the last mammoth died, their massive weathered bones, eroding from riverbanks and bluffs, were discovered by later cultures. These peoples, who had never seen a living mammoth, had to explain the existence of these gigantic, mysterious remains. They became the bones of giants, of monsters, of legendary beasts from a primordial age. The Cyclops of Greek myth, for instance, may have originated from the discovery of mammoth skulls. The large, central nasal opening for the trunk mistaken for a single, giant eye socket, could easily have inspired tales of one-eyed giants. Similar legends of giant creatures are found in the folklore of Native American tribes and across Siberia, a testament to the powerful impression these bones made on the human imagination. For centuries in Europe, these fossils were collected and displayed in churches and curiosity cabinets as evidence of biblical giants or exotic dragons. It wasn't until the 18th and 19th centuries, with the birth of modern paleontology, that scientists like Georges Cuvier began to correctly identify them as the remains of an extinct elephant relative. The name mammoth itself entered the English language from the Siberian Tatar word mamont, meaning earthhorn, a reference to the tusks that were on still are dug from the frozen ground. Today, the mammoth has found a new place in the human world, as a scientific marvel and a cultural icon. The discovery of frozen carcasses in Siberia provides an unprecedented window into the past, allowing scientists to sequence its full genome and understand its biology in exquisite detail. This has, in turn, sparked controversial debates about de-extinction, the theoretical possibility of using genetic engineering to bring the species back, a concept that raises profound ethical and ecological questions. More broadly, the mammoth stands as a powerful symbol. It is a reminder of the incredible diversity of life that existed during the Ice Ages, a world we lost. It features prominently in documentaries, movies, and books, capturing our fascination with the prehistoric past. For archaeologists, the mammoth remains a central character in the story of human evolution, a key to understanding how our ancestors survived and thrived in a challenging world. Perhaps the most profound legacy of the mammoth hunt is what it reveals about ourselves. The collaboration, planning, and communication required to bring down such a beast were foundational to our development as a hypersocial, cooperative species. The spiritual relationship, evidenced by the art and the careful use of the entire animal, speaks to an early capacity for reverence, symbolism, and a worldview that saw humanity as part of nature, not separate from it. The world was remade with the passing of the mammoth. The ecosystems it helped maintain changed forever. Humanity moved on, turning to new challenges and new ways of living. But the memory of that time, when humans stood together against the giants of the Ice Age world, is woven into our collective past. It is a story of respect, of ingenuity, of survival, and ultimately, of loss. It reminds us of the profound impact we can have on our world, and of the fragile, magnificent creatures that share it with us. The echo of the mammoth's trumpet, though silent for millennia, still resonates in the stories we tell, the science we pursue, and the awe we feel for the lost giants of the earth. To understand the totality of the mammoth's influence, we must step away from the drama of the hunt and the grand scale of extinction, and into the daily life of the band. Imagine the world through the eyes of a child born into a culture of mammoth hunters. From their first moments, the mammoth was not a strange beast, but the central pillar of their existence, the source of warmth, food, shelter, and story. Their earliest memories would be sensory and enveloping. The smell of burning mammoth fat in stone lamps, casting a flickering, smoky light that danced on the walls of a hut built from its bones. The feel of incredibly soft, cured mammoth hide wrapped around them as they slept. The taste of rich, fatty mammoth meat, a flavor that meant security and community. The immense, curved tusks that framed the entrance to their home were not trophies. They were the architecture of their world, as familiar and unquestioned as the sky. Their education began almost as soon as they could walk. They would play with discarded fragments of ivory, while nearby, their elders worked the material into tools. They learned the difference between the sound of a reindeer trotting and the deep, seismic vibration that announced the movement of a mammoth herd long before it was visible. They absorbed language steeped in the natural world, words for different types of ivory grain, for the various stages of hide preparation, for the specific behavior of a nervous matriarch. The stories told at night were their history lessons. They were not about abstract kings or battles, but about the great hunts of their grandparents. They learned the names of the hunters who had made the fatal throw, the cleverness of the drivers who turned the herd, the bravery of those who stood guard against the lions. These stories were not mere entertainment. They were vital tutorials in strategy, geography, and social cohesion. They taught the values of courage, patience, obedience, and respect for the animal. A child learned that the mammoth was a generous spirit, but also a dangerous one, and that wastefulness or arrogance could bring misfortune to the entire band. Their toys were practice tools. They would throw small, blunt spears at straw targets, imitating the movements of the hunters. Girls learned from their mothers and aunts how to scrape a hide without tearing it, how to twist sinew into unbreakable thread, how to render fat into fuel. The rhythm of their lives was dictated by the mammoth's legacy. There were periods of intense, joyful labor after a successful hunt, and periods of anxious scarcity when the caches ran low and the herds were distant. The spiritual world was also woven through with the mammoth's image. The shaman's rituals, the chants before a hunt, the respect shown to the bonesoul taught the child that the world was alive with conscious forces. The mammoth they sought to kill was also a spirit to be honored. This created a complex, nuanced worldview that balanced necessity with reverence, the practical with the sacred. For this child, the mammoth was everything. It was the walls of their home, the clothes on their back, the food in their stomach, the subject of their art, and the hero of their myths. Their identity was inextricably linked to the great beast. The gradual disappearance of the mammoth, therefore, would not have been just an economic or ecological crisis. It would have been a cultural and spiritual cataclysm. The stories would have become memories, then legends. The skills, painstakingly honed over generations, would have slowly faded into obsolescence. The world itself would have seemed to diminish. The great, shaking tremors of the herds, replaced by a silence that spoke of a loss almost too profound to comprehend. The passing of the mammoth was the end of their entire world, a song of the steppe that faded into an echo, and then into nothingness. The story of the mammoth did not end with its extinction. In a fascinating twist of fate, the very conditions that led to its demise, the warming climate, are now revealing its secrets, allowing the mammoth to speak to us across the millennia in new and astonishing ways. The modern scientific investigation of the mammoth is rewriting its history in ours, adding incredible detail to the narrative carved in stone and bone. This new chapter began with the discovery of frozen carcasses in the Siberian permafrost. These are not just skeletons, they are complete animals, with skin, hair, muscles, and internal organs preserved in nature's deep freezer. The discovery of calves like Luba and Dima, with their heartbreakingly perfect preservation, has provided an emotional connection to the past that bones alone cannot offer. Scientists can now analyze the mammoth's last meal from the vegetation in its stomach, identify parasites in its gut, and study the composition of its blood. This has transformed our understanding from a theoretical reconstruction into a detailed biological profile. The most revolutionary tool has been paleogenetics. Scientists can now extract and sequence ancient DNA from mammoth remains, from teeth, bone, and frozen tissue. This has allowed them to map the mammoth's entire genome. We now know about their genetic diversity, their evolutionary relationship to modern elephants, and even the genes responsible for their adaptations to the cold, such as their shaggy hair, subcutaneous fat, and hemoglobin that could efficiently release oxygen in freezing temperatures. This genetic evidence has helped solve long-standing puzzles. DNA analysis has confirmed that the woolly mammoth and the North American Columbian mammoth interbred, where their ranges overlapped. It has also traced a population decline, showing how genetic diversity dwindled as their habitat fragmented, making them more vulnerable to disease and environmental change, supporting the synergistic model of their extinction. The recovery of DNA has also sparked the controversial and fascinating prospect of de-extinction. Several scientific projects are exploring the possibility of using CRISPR gene editing technology to splice key mammoth genes for cold tolerance, hairiness, and fat storage into the DNA of an Asian elephant cell, with the goal of creating a hybrid embryo that could be gestated in an artificial womb or a surrogate elephant. Proponents argue this could be a conservation tool, helping to restore the degraded Arctic tundra to a grassland ecosystem that could combat permafrost melt. Critics raise serious ethical concerns about animal welfare, the immense resources required, and the potential ecological consequences of introducing a new large animal into a modern environment. Beyond genetics, new chemical analysis techniques are providing intimate details. Analysis of stable isotopes in mammoth teeth acts as a lifelong dietary record, revealing how their diet changed with the seasons and over their lifetime, and how it shifted as the climate changed. The study of ancient proteins can provide information beyond DNA, helping to identify species from fragmentary remains and understand physiological processes. Even the ancient art is being re-examined with new technology. High-resolution, 3D scanning of cave paintings is revealing previously unseen details. Engraved marks beneath the paint, the order of brushstrokes, the exact pigments used, allowing archaeologists to better understand the techniques and potentially the intentions of the artists who immortalized the mammoth. The mammoth, therefore, is no longer a static figure of the past. It is an active subject of 21st century science. Each frozen carcass, each fragment of DNA, is a new whisper from the permafrost, adding depth, detail, and complexity to our understanding. The story that began with a sharpened flint point is now being continued with a gene sequencer. It is a story that continues to evolve, reminding us that the past is not dead and buried, but a living, breathing field of inquiry that continues to shape our understanding of life, extinction, and our own role on this planet.